I'm very excited about the panel that we have going on in this session. We're going to have a conversation between business and the national and the set of expertise from a national and federal context. I'm very pleased to introduce on our panel today, Casey Anglada DeRaad. Did I pronounce your last name correctly? Good, perfect. Correctly. CEO of NewSpace New Mexico. Angelica Brunkhe, Division President, Albuquerque-based data analytics firm RS21, recent acquisition of RS21. Terry Brunner, CEO of Pivotal New Mexico. John Garcia, District Director of the New Mexico District Office, U.S. Small Business Administration, and Patrick Shaefer, Senior Research Fellow at the Catholic University of Leuven. And I'm very, very excited to hear from you all. We had a preliminary conversation about this same question, and we got into the weeds, into some of the big issues that it would take to get New Mexico on the path toward a resilient and sustainable recovery. And that's how I wanted to I want to begin today. Before I create some more synthetic questions, I'd like to go across the list, and I'll begin again in reverse. I'm going to begin with Patrick, and we're going to talk a little bit. I'd like Patrick to first respond by first welcome Patrick, and share with us your thoughts on what it would take to build New Mexico into a more resilient and sustainable recovery.
Sure. Well, I think this question of I don't know, can you all hear me?
A little choppy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Choppy. Okay. Well, I think that the question of resilience is one that is really deep in our New Mexico history and our New Mexico communities. I think that being resilient after 19 should be something that we even look to the resilience.
Patrick, you're breaking up a little bit.
This will mean really looking at how valuable we are. Okay, Manuel, do you want to come back to me and I'll check the connection?
Yeah, that'll work. Yeah, sorry about that, Patrick. Patrick's reaching us from across the Atlantic, so thank you very much, Patrick. Let's go to I don't even have the list ahead of me, so we'll go in reverse alphabetical order. We'll go with John Garcia.
Yeah, okay. Listen, again, it's a pleasure to catch up with you, Manuel, and everybody else on this important topic. I think COVID-19 forum, the way forward is a question I think everyone should be asking themselves now that we're coming out of this bunker environment of social distancing, and now that everybody's getting their COVID shots. I got mine back in February, and it gave me kind of a peace of mind anyway. But I think, let me just start off by saying, I think, with every crisis, there's always some new challenges. And these new challenges are presenting some new opportunities for, I think, New Mexico and people and businesses across the country. After every major conflict, whether it be World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, there was always social change. And I think this COVID war, this COVID environment, and now that we're getting our vaccines, we're seeing the social change. You can't see the damage, but we know the damage is there from an economic development standpoint. It's affected us individually, and it's affected us from an economic standpoint. And the big key, I think, is that these challenges now, we're in this post-COVID discussion, is what are those new opportunities going to look like? And so with this COVID having disrupted many businesses, both large and small across the country, it's forcing all of us now to adapt to the change of our economic environment. Many of the entrepreneurs out there that have been thinking about starting a business, this is probably the linchpin that says, all right, I'm going to do it now, because everything else has kind of failed in the last year or so. And now they're coming out of that bunker mentality. We've seen at least over 280 some new business began to start up this last year. And so we know that entrepreneurial spirit that exists in New Mexico and across the country, I think, is there as was stated just a few minutes ago, the resiliency of the American people, I think, is strong, and we will become stronger after this. But I think we also we have to think of new ways of starting our businesses, and we need to move forward to adapt to many of these new challenges. So for us, anyway, the SBA, the challenges are they're many, and how we work to assist the communities to be more economically, socially, and environmentally stable and resilient. That's going to be changed. We're going to need to create a more sustainable business environment, and that discussion has to take place. To just think that you know, the COVID we know is it will be gone soon, someday soon. We just don't know when, but we've got to prepare for that. And so we need to work with our local communities as partners to identify specific needs. We need to capture local knowledge, generate community solutions that improve small business standings in the eyes of the public. It has to become more increasingly important to build public confidence of a healthy work environment. You know, I was talking to a couple of restaurant owners just yesterday. If we can't rebuild the public confidence, even with the COVID shots, which is you know, helping get people out of their bunkers and get back out into, you know, back into what they were doing before COVID. If we can't build that public confidence, many of the small businesses are going to continue to suffer. And so we've got to do that in a partnership environment that is forcing us, because of COVID, to work with other partners that we hadn't thought of working closely with. So the COVID pandemic, I believe, and I'm just reading some notes that I wrote down for this discussion, it's exposed how interconnected we are with everything in this age of a global economy. So we need to revise we need to rethink about how we run our businesses, our productions, our trade, our consumption of goods and services. A business owner I was talking to yesterday, he's trying to regroup his corporate strategic plan to be more effective to delivery of his products. He can't just wait, open the door, and have a mob of people coming into his business. He knows that's not going to happen anymore. So he's adapting. So adaptability is the big factor. But and to give you an example, I think of that, Manuel, is that as we get our vaccines, we're going to begin to travel more to see our families or friends, probably within the state, if not the confined state, if not maybe go to Arizona or the states. But we're also seeing other industries, like maybe the traveling to another country or travel on a cruise ship. That's not going to happen for a long while. So there are some businesses, I think, that are going to succeed and some that won't. And those that won't have to really analyze and look at themselves to reevaluate. And so we need to adapt to utilizing social media support. We need to adapt to how we use that social media for advertising our products, selling our goods and services through social media, marketing ourselves more effectively, you know, cutting advertising costs. That's what social media kind of does. Working through emails. I find myself, even the SBA, we're all doing it, even what we're doing today, these type of webinars, I'm able to reach more people this last year than I have in the last 6 years I've been to the SBA. We had a webinar that had 4,300 people on the call. We've been doing webinars statewide, region-wide. So the information flows there, but I think what we're lacking, and that's going to be a challenge, is the human touch. You know, it's easier for, you know, it was easier to go to a conference with a couple of hundred people there, shake hands, meet people, exchange business cards. That is, to me, going to be a way of the past. I don't think we're going to get out to a conference with 200 people in the hotel. So the hotel is going to take a beating on that. I think we're getting used to utilizing Zooms and webinars and different methods of communication, and it's going to have to fit into our corporate strategic plan of your business development. So today there's now, I think, a wider spread of remote working. I was not, let me say, a big fan of telework. I have become a fan of telework. All my employees are now teleworking, and we've learned to adapt to that. You know, yesterday I went into my office, And one of my employees emailed that she wanted to come in. I said, come on in. And it just felt real different for me after a year of teleworking to have a body, a person in my office that I could just walk down the hall and talk to. That was very unusual, very different. So I think we're going to have to adapt to that. So as you know, I think we've all been experimenting with these last few years, teleworking. And so working with that and adapting to webinars and Zooms and Twitter and social media, I think is going to allow us to expand our products, goods, and services. Virtual work is growing. The SBA and the federal government has done a survey on the impact of telework. Does it work? Is it good? Is it bad? So they're even looking at that at the federal level. Big offices, I think, may be something of the past. So I think a lot of industries that have offices where they have people come in and out, that's going to change. So there are now a lot of new tools, I think, that are coming up because of COVID. And in this post-COVID environment, I think we're going to be looking at these new economic outreaches. And so what's missing, though, as I said earlier, is that one-on-one human element touch. For those of us like in New Mexico, you know, we're abrazo people. We need to shake hands and talk about our families and everything. Social media is making it difficult. You know, all I can see is your heads, you know, and it's different. You can't read body language. You can't, it's just different. And so we're having to adapt to that, even at the federal level. So as we move forward in this post-COVID environment, we need to increase, I believe, three major points. We need to increase our adaptability for collaboration, communication, and cooperation. Particularly for me at the SBA with my resource partners, but I think at the city, state, government level, we all have resource partners that we're going to have to work closer with in those three elements: collaboration, cooperation, and communication. But like all great crises that our country has faced, this pandemic, I believe, is going to come to an end. When? I don't know. But the question is going to be, I think, Manuel, whether we emerge into a better and more sustainable future is going to depend on how, I think, our political leaders, our business leaders, if they've got the vision and the courage to follow, I think, the advice or recommendation from economic experts. The advice and guidance that you're getting from this COVID forum this day, I'm sure it's being recorded, and there's going to be some great suggestions to put that before our leaderships that help us make those decisions, that help guide our country. It's going to be real important for them to realize that and see that vision where we can move forward. So I think
that's right.
From the SBA side, let me just try to close with this. It's become, I think the SBA, as I said to you earlier, when I first joined the SBA 6 years ago, and someone asked me, who are you with? I said, I'm with the SBA, and they thought I was with the Southern Baptist Association. They hadn't heard of the SBA. And now, because of COVID, we are forced to be on the front line. We're at the tip of the spear and helping keep our economy going, not to allow our small business to become paralyzed. So we've had to just get on the front burner of it. So the SBA has become a very important toolbox with some very valuable tools inside this toolbox to assist and help our small business grow and thrive. And so to provide the economic tools to help our economy grow, the SBA provides the technical counseling with our resource partners. We provide capital access with our lending partners. We provide contracting guidance. That established in the early 50s that 23% of federal government money must go to small businesses. And so we push that, but I can't do that work. We can't do that work without utilizing our resource partners. And from the SBA side, the SBDCs, small business development centers, are critical. 18 centers across the state. They've got technical professionals in there that can provide the technical counseling, and it's all free. It's part of our toolbox. And I'm just surprised how many people aren't aware of that's out there for rural communities in Farmington and Doña Ana County. They're all over the state. We have 3 chapters of SCORE chapters, one in Santa Fe, one in Albuquerque, and in Las Cruces. They're all funded by the state, but they're also funded in part by the SBA as well. West, they manage 6 of our women business centers across the state. Then we have the Veteran Business Outreach Center that provides business guidance and development to our 16,000 veteran-owned businesses in the state. Keep in mind, there's 157,000 small businesses in New Mexico. And because of the PPP, we've impacted about 32,000 small businesses for a total of about $3 billion of PPP money, in addition to the economic injury disaster money. And now the SBA we've launching our Shutter Venue Operator Grant Program. We're beginning to launch the Restaurant Relief Grant. These are grants, and we're not in the grant business, but we're implementing these programs in partnership. So we've had to pull our partners together, and we all agree to collaborate, communicate, and cooperate together to provide that assistance that I think our small business and community is going to need for sustainability and for growth.
John, I'd like to move to the next panelist just for a moment, because I want to synthesize all of the stuff that you got. I know you got a wealth of information you got going on.
So let me just say, the pandemic has created, I think, some opportunities for us, and this platform is allowing us to discuss that. So thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it. No,
I think it's perfect. I think exactly what you said. Part of what's going on with COVID is that we're now, I'd like to think that, I'm hoping that in this tragedy and in these difficulties, COVID becomes one component of probably one of the most expensive and most difficult civics lessons of all time.
No doubt.
And in and of itself, we're learning new vocabularies, and we're learning to communicate and interface with each other in a way that has been unprecedented as citizens, but also as business people.
No, so absolutely.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Yeah. Patrick, I see you're back on 5G, which is great. And I think you can now bounce back in.
Well, I'm still here in Albuquerque, by the way, and these spring winds, how they wreak some havoc sometimes, disrupt the router. But I, in fact, would really like to follow on John's point and Manuel's mention here about finding value in difficulty. And I just would like to focus my thoughts here around New Mexico's special value, and the special value that it has always had, and the special value that it has even today, even in these COVID experiences, even in the trade uncertainties, and with a kind of fraught outlook as we move into the coming years. So what I want to really point out is that resilience is in New Mexico's nature. It's in our soil, it's in our air. It's something that our communities have been dealing with since time immemorial. So I think that coming out into a new period of difficulty is nothing we can't handle. And I also want to say that, as we talk about certain areas that we might be able to build on and build ideas around and build value around for our communities and our families and our businesses, that there's also significant opportunities to collaborate with the federal government, as John just shared with us. So I want to say that what New Mexico has, the world needs, and what I mean by that is that the world is facing challenges that we are also facing here in our state. And in many ways, the whole point of building a business is to find a value-added solution to a challenge. And this is something that drives economies and drives the US economy, small businesses, big businesses. They're all trying to find solutions to difficulties. Well, let me just point out a few that I think New Mexico has been working on and could work on in the future that can provide investment opportunities, that can allow our communities to work together more closely here, increase well-being here, economic well-being, social well-being, and also contributing to markets and opportunities regionally and internationally. So, we're, first of all, I think, a region that is remote from water. We're in the mountains. And that immediately provides challenges that in some ways have already been touched on. We're not, by the way, just coming out of a COVID pandemic. We're within a severe drought,
Yeah.
crisis as well. And that doesn't look to get better anytime soon. And I think Terry might be able to speak in a few minutes about the role of agriculture and the challenges of the droughts. But if we have challenges with droughts, it's something that we can build value-added businesses around: engineering, distribution of water, measurement of water, cleaning of water, treatment of water, getting water from one part of the state to the other across this difficult terrain that requires, again, more engineering, more materials, more science. So just even when you're thinking about helping our state stay strong economically with things like water and transportation networks, it's something that we can really direct and get strategies around at the community level, at the county level, and at the state level, and then also partner very closely with our federal representatives and our federal agencies and support. Also, I think, incidentally, I'd like to talk about public safety here too as well, because I think there's a relationship between public safety and economic well-being and community well-being. And we're very challenged by public safety and particularly organized crime, again, because of our privileged position as a trade route between the Pacific, the Gulf, and the US and Mexico. So places like Albuquerque and others around the state are facing these issues of trafficking and crime. And I think that we can also provide solutions here with lawyering, with community service, with intervention, with social services that can be not only helping New Mexicans around the state, but can serve as a value-added model to share with, consult with, to export to other communities around the world that are dealing with similar issues. I think also energy is an area that we can really build on, whether that's traditional hydrocarbons or also renewables. I was just joking earlier about how the wind knocked out the router, and certainly the wind wreaks havoc on many of our activities here in New Mexico. Try to keep your car clean for a week in the spring, So, but that wind then provides us opportunities to export, this kind of renewable energy, to build factories and manufacturing to the extent that we can here in New Mexico by, using attractive energy prices, baseload prices for manufacturing, et cetera. And then again, I would just go back to, I think, maybe the fundamental point about all this is our position in the world, our geography. And this again presents challenges for us because they do things differently in Texas, they do things differently in Mexico, they do things differently in Arizona and California. And New Mexico is kind of right in the middle of that. So sometimes it's difficult for us to, easily partner with each other across these distances. But at the same time, we're in a very special place that can really help, trade and business flow more easily. We can help connect people. I often like to point out just the design of the New Mexico flag and how it points to the 4 directions. So I think that there's strength not only in our diversity as a state and our historic diversity, cultural diversity, linguistic diversity, but I think there's really value in our adversity, in the adversities that New Mexico faces that we can just find solutions to, we can be entrepreneurial about, and then share them with others across the trade routes that extend throughout our communities in all 4 corners of the state.
That's fantastic. What both you and John are drawing to is something that's been a thread throughout the forum so far, is that we're talking about relationships and infrastructure in these broad buckets, but also the very deep ways in which these specific dimensions from New Mexico emanate and produce opportunities. I'm really grateful for that. Thank you. Angelica, I'm going to go to you, then Terry, then Casey. And Angelica has a unique perspective in that she's been in the healthcare industry or related to the healthcare industry. So I'm very interested in your thoughts on this.
Absolutely. Very happy to be here. I know you, Manuel, and Linda have put a lot of time into this panel discussion. So I want to make sure I meet your needs and follow the format that you set for us. So just to reiterate, you want us to speak high level to the points, and then we'll go into roundtable discussion where we can deep dive. Okay.
Sure.
All right. I think that what's really important is that we rethink what recovery looks like. So when you think of the definition of recovery, it's a return to a normal state. Well, what if we don't want our businesses to return the way they were prior? What if we want them to be more successful and more resilient and more adaptable to certain economic circumstances? So I think that if we kind of change that perspective as we talk about businesses and the new normal, what that really looks like and what that really means, because maybe it can be a lot better. I'm notorious for finding the silver lining in any situation, and having been a business owner for the last 4 years now, I understand how critical it is to be able to have that skill set. They call it it's delusional optimism to be an entrepreneur and a business owner, and sometimes you have to have that to be able to survive. And I think that's something that our businesses who are still here have demonstrated. They're resilient and they've survived. And I like what Patrick said on the resiliency is part of New Mexico. It's what we are. It's what we've been facing last couple hundred of years. We grow and we thrive. And so rethinking that normal state, and also rethinking what we can do with the resources that are being provided. I think the funding is absolutely phenomenal, but I think it was phase one of what to do to rebuild. And so now we have to think about what other steps can be used to maybe provide education to our business community on how to use those dollars, and not just using those dollars to pay the bills, but maybe they invest in something that makes their business more adaptable. Maybe they use it to look at a new business model, make a way to make their services available at a broader scale or in a remote way, because we've seen that remote is what's critical to thriving. And then the third point is that it's important to remember that the impact to businesses and their owners goes beyond the financial. It's mental health as well. Being a business owner in a business who happens to work exclusively in health and healthcare data, I can speak to the mental health impact in New Mexico as we have that level of view. And across the country, behavioral health claims have been on the rise, and it's because depression is up. I think someone on our call with John Garcia mentioned, there are business owners calling who were suicidal. And I think that's something that the rest of the community doesn't always remember, that our business owners put their life, their heart, their soul into creating a business. And for some of them who had to watch it die, that's devastating. And so just keeping an eye on mental and emotional health and the impact as well, it's important.
Really powerful observation, especially given the near existential crises we experience in such a great level, even with political turnaround, with changes in our political structure, the ideological differences that have manifested. We often forget that business people are also, in many senses, doubly citizen, because they operate as economic drivers, but they also operate as individual citizens themselves, and it's a massive challenge to overcome. Thank you for that perspective. Terry, you have the ag perspective and a bunch of other supportive ecosystem perspectives. So how would you answer this question?
So I think about it, and I'll start with the global, then get down to the local. I just think we're in such an incredible time of opportunity, and you have these factors happening that when you combine them all, really makes for something that New Mexico could take advantage of. I mean, you have a recovery in a sense happening, in various types of ways. And then you have a complete change in US economic policy, where deficits don't matter anymore. Spending is just through the roof. Money is easier to get than it's really ever been. Interest rates are as low as possible. We used to say, when I was in the federal system at USDA, that we're having a money sale. Rates are 0%. There should be money should be a non-issue and a non-factor. If you read the Recovery Act, If you read the CARES Act, if you look at the Biden infrastructure bill, the amount of money on the table is incredible. So we should no longer be talking about not being able to get broadband here or not being able to solve. I mean, if you use the federal money that's there and the state money's there, you could build every drinking water system in the state that has a request open with the state of New Mexico right now. You could build every sewer system. You could almost build just about every highway. It's incredible. And so, you know, it's the opportunity is just sitting there. And I've seen recessions. I've seen the incredible growth in the 90s that we had here into the early 2000s. And really, it's what scares me a little bit is I see New Mexico watching the train go by the station. And the question is, you know, are you going to jump on that train and be a part of this? Or are we going to do a passive kind of watch the train go by? And I think of that New Mexico motto, what is it? Crescit Undo. It goes as it grows, which to me is a very passive kind of watch the plant grow activity, rather than a more engaged, aggressive type of perspective. I mean, if you look, how much did we talk about the economy at the last legislative session and workforce development? How much did we talk about job creation? We really didn't talk about it. I challenge anybody to tell me what the state economic development plan is right now. And these are important things because we already missed out on CARES Act funding. You know, FCC had a telehealth program. We know telehealth is a giant issue here. They had grants available with a simple application. Most states got 10 or more awards. We got 1 award. You know, and we know it's an issue. The question is, how much do we choose to engage in it? And I fear that New Mexico, in a sense, sits back and lets the world impact us, when we should be of the attitude mindset that we are going to impact the world, because the opportunity is there. It's just ours for the taking. So I think those are the kind of the key issues that we see out there. And what also worries me is I talk to county officials, I talk to businesses, I talk to nonprofits, and there's still an austerity mindset in our state. There's still a reluctance to put ourselves out. So I will talk to, you know, county officials about the millions they just received in Recovery Act money, millions, okay? The city of Carlsbad, $6 million to spend. And they say, well, we're being really cautious. We don't know if we should take any risk with this money. I have other communities that say, we don't know if we'll take the money. And you just say, wait a second, like now's the chance. Like all you complained about was having no money. And now we're like giving you money and you don't know what to do with it. So really it's upon us to really talk to small businesses, talk to public officials about taking some risk and putting ourselves out there a little bit more than we're used to, and jumping on the bandwagon and jumping on that train at the station when it's coming by. So in a lot of ways, and we really urged state leadership to do this last year, was, you know you're going to eventually come out of the pandemic. So plan prior to that happening for what you're going to do next. We still haven't done it. And so that's really the opportunity for all of us, I think, to pressure leaders on this subject. And I'll just make one other point, is there was a great article in the New York Times this week talking about communities and how they're preparing post-pandemic. You all know we have I-40 here in Albuquerque. We have a massive rail presence in our state, and trains passing by every day. Giant rigs are passing by on the highway, but it is hard. I gotta say, you had Randy Trask on here, who's fantastic. hard to get public officials to see the opportunity for transportation and trade. And in the New York Times this week, Tucson has invested hundreds of millions in figuring out the trade situation. They get the Amazon, they get the eBay, they get the other shippers, and they're Tucson. They're on I-10. They don't have near the rail presence that we have. And why is Tucson beating us on transportation? It just doesn't make any sense. We've also got an incredible history of transportation and trade. But the reason they're beating us is that they're focused and they're obsessed with it. And they've all decided we are going to beat everybody else in trade and transportation. I'm not saying that has to be our focus. There's smarter people than me that can figure that out. But there's something that we can be more aggressive and pointed towards. And I think now's the time to do it. It's almost kind of like we should have done it yesterday type of thing. And I don't want to be too lectury about it because I want to stay positive. There's still the opportunity to jump on the bandwagon here on recovery.
I think absolutely. I think that's right. And a lot of these problems now are now in the domain of our political will. And political will is dependent upon grammar. And it's before I get to Casey, I just want to acknowledge, I believe Joanna Buckley says in the chat, which we are we referring to? And Lucho responds with, well, that's actually part of the question. It's yes, all in all capacities, but that's the question we have. Who is the quote unquote we in this particular discussion? And that existential question is actually about who we are as a community and how we build the vibrant relationships and include people in order to have the political will to be able to invest and move forward with these things and move into the doing as well as the being. So really, really powerful. We have somebody here who focuses on the skyward element, right? We're now dealing with the celestial axis of things, not just latitude and longitude when we talk to Casey, who works with the space industry. So I'd really love to hear your thoughts about this particular question.
Okay, well, I've almost thrown out all my points I was going to make after hearing you all. Terry, I just want to say amen, brother. Like, we need to think bigger. That's, the question I wanted to start with here is even before this COVID money was around, we have to think bigger. I think what I have found, quick intro, Casey Anglada DeRaad. I'm a New Mexican. I love my New Mexico, my companies and our workforce, and really just trying to do things that help them. I have a long career with the Air Force, and in that time, towards the end of my career, worked partnerships, and I would just see how so much comes into our state and then leaves our state, and it's frustrating. And that's why I wanted to. There was things I couldn't do to help specifically New Mexico companies or New Mexico workforce from the Air Force. It's a federal lab. You can't sort of have a soft spot for just the one state. So that's where I thought I would jump out. I started NewSpace New Mexico, and it's really to just start, first of all, communicating to the leaders. Do you all realize what we have? Do you realize where we're at with, some of the things Terry is talking about in the transportation, where we're located perfectly? And I'd like to add, Terry, that with the spaceport, that adds another layer of transportation where I think people see that, and we're excited for Virgin Galactic to to have the first commercial astronaut. But also, can you see later where maybe there might be some part that's developed in northern Mexico that can get flown from here to Dubai in an hour, right? So we need to think bigger. And what I tried to do with NewSpace New Mexico is what I see when I first started putting this together. I felt like there was a lot of territorialism, sort of, what are you doing? Are you going to come what are you trying to do? Take what we're doing. Is like, no, I'm trying to break down walls. I'm trying to let people know, like, as you collaborate, you start partnering, you start understanding, the assets and the strengths we have, and start looking at how, we could come together and support what you're doing. And then we'll do this part, but really just work together and start seeing there's so much out there. There's no need that we have to have this scarcity mentality of, well, we don't have enough money for that. If you have a good idea, the money will come. You don't need to worry so much for the money. And what I've seen in a lot of the states that are experiencing this big growth, is their state and their federal and their local and their private organizations, academic organizations are working together. We have to come together and we have to sort of trust each other and break down these walls, think bigger. Randy made a great point on the previous panel about how, everyone's trying to get back to the new normal. Well, New Mexico wasn't in that strong of we took so long to come out of that economic downturn from 2008. We were one of the slower states to come around. So rather than thinking about getting back to that new normal, let's look ahead. Let's get on the train and really, try to work together, put tools in place that will help our companies and go further than what's normal, better than what was normal. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Casey. I appreciate that. I recognize, and this is to one of Patrick's points earlier as well. New Mexico has always been, it's very difficult for us to establish a parameter for normal for how we have grown as a state. And I think Crescendo Undo is actually part of that motto. That is indicative of that. And one of it, I've often said, people come to me and they say, I really want to come to this class for some real world experience when I'm teaching the class. And my answer is always, which reality? Which real world are you talking about? Because in a sense, New Mexico has often occupied multiple realities at once. This is a place where there are different perspectives and worldviews about how one uses resources and how one shares it, which is why I think our chat bar over here is firing up about who really are we as a state, and how are we going to be able to organize that well enough to get to that level of collaboration that you're referring to, Casey. As we kind of move into this bigger question, that's something I'd like to move into, and I'd invite anybody to chime in as they see fit. These types of relational structures are also built on our relationship to and the way that we view these institutions. The federal government and New Mexico have a very, very interesting relationship, very complex relationship. We have a lot of public lands here. We have a lot of historical relationships that have been good and bad regarding the relationship to the federal government. And right now, we're dealing now with an entirely new era, to Terry's point, about how federal institutions are intervening in our lives and either helping or sending messages about our economic destiny. So what are the specific instances of what this federal or national world we live in right now, this reality, how is that impacting New Mexico, and how are we going to use that to benefit and seize on these opportunities that you guys are talking about? And I leave it open to anybody to start out. John, I believe you're muted.
I appreciate what all the panelists have been saying. I think we're right on, but I think as far as New Mexico goes, you don't know what you have until you leave it. And like some of us, we have moved away from the state, and then we saw a lot of potential at a bird's eye view. And I said to myself, why not New Mexico? But I come back to New Mexico, and I love my state like we all do. And we're a service provider state. We cater to tourism, and we have a sub-industry of arts and crafts. And it seems like we stay focused on that, but yet we have the highest number of PhDs per capita than any other state. And we should be growing strong in our technology arena. We have no real manufacturing firms here in our state. We're a manufacturing poor state. And so I asked myself, why aren't we attracting manufacturing plants? Why are we getting out of the box? Right now, if the Balloon Fiesta doesn't come to New Mexico, we're all suffering. If any tourism event doesn't come to the state, we're impacted. And so we're dependent so much on tourism. We build everything around tourism. And it's not to say there's nothing wrong with that, but I think New Mexico has more to offer, and it's difficult to get, I think sometimes we have to take our blinders off and look forward. The analogy Terry used that we got to get on the train. I agree that the train's going through, but New Mexico's become so dependent on federal contracts. You know, we're a twin state. We became a state the same time Arizona did. It was part of Mexico territory. And we stayed dependent on federal contracts, and they became entrepreneurial. And they developed differently than we did. So I asked myself, why is that? So what we need to do is, I think, take our blinders off, get out of the box, take advantage of what's going on now. But we need to have a strategic plan for growth for New Mexico, other than just being a service provider state. And I honestly believe, I think it's going to take some visionary leadership to agree and to push it. But it seems like every time we try to push an idea from some visionary leader, the first thing we want to do is beat it down. So that's not New Mexico. And so we are sometimes our own worst enemy. And I think what we need to do is get out of that box. There's a lot of entrepreneurial young thinkers today that want to move New Mexico forward. I think the technology arena and trying to bring in manufacturing is big. We're a border state. We fought hard to have an intermodal facility in southern New Mexico. And, you know, sometimes if we can't get Albuquerque to look south of Belen, and we can't get Las Cruces look north of Socorro. So we've got to unite, I think, under one strategic plan. You mentioned Carlsbad got, like, or Terry did, $6 million. And all the communities are getting their fair share of pie, but are we on a unified action plan? Are we on a unified development plan? You mentioned that there was hardly any discussion during the legislative session on that, on post-COVID. Well, why not? And so here we are, you know, talking about our small businesses, and my small business owners, they all have a PhD in business development. They have to be passionate, they have to be hungry, and they have to be determined, and they are, and they will survive. What is the state's plan for development and growth post-COVID? What is our new direction that will enhance entrepreneurship development? We don't have that action plan. And so I think collectively, we have to come together, not just us here, but the leadership of the state that we've elected has to come together to create that unified action plan for growth and development for New Mexico and move us in a new direction for the 21st century. Yeah, let's complement and support our tourism industry. I think it's great. But we saw us suffer when we shut everything down, and no conventions came into town. Everything shut down. The restaurants shut down because we cater to tourism, but we had no other industry to keep the fires burning. We had none. So that's kind of my take on your question.
Great, thank you. I see Angelica and then Terry.
I think part of that action plan has to be enhancing the skills of our workforce and providing education. And we won't see the effects of that until years to come. But what if there is a COVID part 2 someday? What if there's some other economic disaster where, to John's point, if all the fast food industry shut down, it shouldn't shut down our economy. We should have a skill force that is educated enough to be able to have jobs to where that doesn't impact them and it doesn't have such a devastating impact. I'll use our company as an example. We've been trying to hire for a senior healthcare analyst. It's a skill set that's in demand across the country, something that needs to be fostered within our community, but we're talking a 6-figure position that we can't find a person in town to hire for. We had a preference for local, wanting to develop this here in our hometown and not able to find that. And so we're flooded with applicants across the country. These are, in demand positions, yet we don't have a curriculum for that. I got my master's in this program outside of state because we didn't offer it here. So just, evaluating the emerging industries and the new era of jobs that are available for anyone who has a computer. So thinking about that and just growing that, enhancing that skill set. It's beyond the traditional service industry that we want to grow in New Mexico. We want people who, we have some of the best and brightest in the state. 100% agree with John. Why aren't we leveraging that more? And why don't we have more people who are building their own businesses in tech? Tech is booming here, but why are we still struggling with the workforce here? And so I think that's a big part in our path forward, and a part of that action plan is developing the skill set here so that, one, that they don't have to leave the state to get high paying jobs, and two is to attract the most talented to come to our state and help build us and help make us stronger.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. Thank you, Angelica. Terry, you want to follow up on that?
Well, on the federal side, I mean, I think if you look at the last 100 years of growth, a lot of it was driven by the federal presence in post-World War II, the development of bases here, and then gradually the development of laboratories. And our idea as a state was that would benefit the state by providing jobs, but also providing a professional class that went with those bases and those labs. And I think as a state, you kind of got to decide how much you want to emphasize that. I mean, the nice thing about the federal government is if they want to expand the labs, they're paying for it. They're going to do it. You don't have to lift much of a finger to get them to build a new, extension on the base, or try a satellite program, or whatever it is. And so that builds up some bad habits, though, in a sense that we just say, let them do it. They can figure it out. And I think it's been detrimental to our ability to execute on a lot of business ideas. So as when I was with USDA, and prior to that, Senator Bingham's office, one of the things you do as a federal employee that works on economic development or rural development or whatever, is you hear pitches all the time. I heard a pitch for every ag idea on the face of the planet. I don't know how many marijuana pitches and hemp pitches I heard. I just heard a pitch for a $35 million vertical greenhouse in Cuesta, New Mexico. Those are great ideas. Some of them are probably too dreamy. And we tend to focus, in my skepticism on the marijuana front is, people talk about the incredible industry around marijuana. No one ever talks about the transportation or talks about the logistics. No one ever talks about the employment needs in the industry. They just talk in more dreamy terms about this is all the great stuff it's going to do, but it's the execution that we're missing out on. And so, whether it's the shrimp farm in Clovis or various other ideas out there, it's like we tend to reach for the stars. Like, for instance, when we made a bid for Amazon to come here to the state. I mean, we spent so much time and effort on that, trying to compete against New York City. And I mean, the time we spent on that, if we would have spent time executing on maybe more realistic projects, we could have gotten more done. So, I think there's choices to be made. And I'll say one last thing sorry, somebody wrote in the comments, shrimp farm. Yeah, the shrimp farm idea and the popsicle factory idea kind of made its way through rural New Mexico, never got executed on, but it was a dreamy concept to have a shrimp farm or a popsicle factory. But one other thing I'll say about federal installations, when I worked for Senator Bingham's office, at the same time, my brother worked for a senator from Virginia and worked on military issues and veterans issues. And he said, it's my job to steal missions from New Mexico. So I want to dismantle Sandia. I want to take every helicopter group you have out of New Mexico and put it in Virginia. And Mississippi thinks the same way. And that's part of their economic strategy. But so we have some decisions to make about strategically what we want to do. And I think it's a valid conversation. And a good point you raised, Manuel, about what that relational structure is with the federal government and what it should be. If we're not going to do that, or we want to kind of disassociate ourselves from the feds, we have to have a viable alternative we can execute on. It can't just be a dream. It's got to be executable. So that would be my 2 cents.
Can I say just a couple of things?
Sure.
So I know the other
Absolutely,
get
Casey.
in
Yeah.
there, but you know, coming from the Air Force and like I said, seeing these federal assets, I know a lot of times different folks in the state say we gotta stop living off the federal dollars, and I totally agree. But what we have to do is it's a good thing that we have these stable federal contracts, but let's look at it and use them to be a launch pad to be able to get more help to the companies. And with NewSpace New Mexico, that's what we're trying to do. We're getting some federal dollars, we're getting some state dollars, but what we're trying to do is how do we use these to put tools in place for the companies, for the entrepreneurs, for the workforce, so that you can solve these needs. So then the companies can grow in this industry sector, can expand and grow, and we can start attracting more from these other states. And so with NewSpace New Mexico, we're trying to go big or go home, and we'll let you know if it works out. And maybe some of these tools and processes and ideas we're trying to put in place to be able to leverage that big federal dollar, but do it for growing an industry sector. We'll let you know, talk to you in a year and see if it works, and other sectors can copy it, hopefully. But we're really trying to, you know, use those dollars, don't just shun them, right? So that's what I have.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. And much success to you, I hope. Yeah. Patrick, do you have any thoughts on this?
Sure. Yes, I was just listening to everybody and thinking about our conversation. And a few days ago, when I was telling somebody about our panel today, I was describing how, in many ways, resilience and recovery is like an act of faith. It's something you need to really practice. I think for our state, for any community, what you have done today, Manuel, with your partners, Lucio, CNM, is really instrumental in that, as John was saying earlier about collaboration, connecting, communicating. This is something that I think also needs to be exercised with respect to the federal government to be a help to us. And, you know, there are short-term benefits for working with the federal government, which Terry described. There's benefits working with the federal government, as John described as well. But there are also longer-term strategic, years-long ideas about how to work with the federal government. The relationship to the labs and the military here has been an ongoing, decades-long conversation, which will surely go into the future. But just thinking about, you know, what the federal government is involved in that touches on New Mexico. We are a state with 35% government land. We have an international border. We have transnational issues taking place in and around New Mexico. I think that the real opportunity here or mechanism is to really bring this kind of thinking on a regular, periodic basis, a continual basis, to our high schools, to our families, to our counties, to our elected officials. As Terry also said, economic development was really absent from the legislative discussion. We'll look at the legislature, look at the resources it has. Does it have a full-time body or a group of researchers on economic issues? You know, how robust is it? How serious of a commitment is it for the state? So I just also want to think about our discussion of resiliency, think about what that is with respect to the federal government, and then bring it down to the community level, to the working families, to the teachers, to our small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses. And I think finally, maybe just to offer, you know, a bit of an anecdote, we just renegotiated a trade agreement with Mexico. And was New Mexico really present? Were we, you know, how involved in the negotiations were we? And how much does the federal government know about our interest or needs with respect to trade, for example? So I think that the issues that are of a federal nature offer, again, an adversity for New Mexico, but if we can continue to think about the opportunities that it provides at a community level with our businesses, that I think we'll be better off for it.
That's fantastic. You know, all of these discussions have reminded me, each of you in your own ways have been working very hard to be advocates with and for the people that have come to your offices, who have contacted you personally, or who you've been thinking about in a very specific way. And I'm not only grateful for that, but it reminds me how difficult the work of diversity is. If we are diverse, it's a lot of invisible labor that is done in order to achieve that. And that's one of the things that New Mexico is also, I think it was Terry who said kind of leveraging adversity, or it may have been you or Patrick, but either way, it's that adversity, it's that level of intersection, but also meaningful intersection, that is one of those giant issues. I think that we've moved into a point in our history where it's not just the federal government that we're thinking about, it's also the national discourse that is also dominating some of these discussions. And we're having a national discourse now about who benefits in this society, who is included in this society. And those are things that are corresponding with the sort of policies and the other agendas that are being developed at the governmental level. So I know that we're at 2:02 right now. We have till 2:15. I want to just generally get a couple of thoughts about where you think the future of the Fed national discourse is going. Where's that discussion going, so that we're aware of that in our mind as well as New Mexicans when we're thinking about our economic destiny. And that could be in any manner of thing. It could be a governmental thing, it could be a policy thing. But I just ask that each of you just mention one thing that's changing in the federal system or in the national discourse that you think is something that we need to be paying attention to.
I guess I could go first. Mine's specific, and I think the others will come in with more general terms. But with regard to space, what the federal government is realizing is the private side is going much faster, and so I see them, at least in the R&D realm, which is a lot of what's going on in New Mexico. New Mexico is strong in the R&D side. They're starting to see we need to leverage on that private side more, and we need to put partnerships in place so that we can really leverage that private side more. So for me, with respect to that federal level, is I'm finding that the federal side is really looking for more partnership and open to nonprofits like ours to help broker those deals between the private and federal. So that's what.
Yeah.
Thank you, Casey.
I think what COVID has done, and I totally agree with you, Casey, is that COVID has allowed us, I think, to step back, take a look and listen to what, from the federal side, the private sector is saying and has been saying for a long time. There's got to be a partnership here. We have to create a new vision for the country, and our leadership has to create that vision, and we have to, I think, provide the information, the resource to our leadership for that vision. If we don't have a vision where we want to go as a country, as a state, we're going to stay stagnant, and stagnation leads to mediocrity, and sometimes that leads to being comfortable. COVID, I think, is an opportunity right now. It's a crisis, yes, as I said earlier, but it's creating this challenge for us to develop this and find this new opportunity. I recall back, and as Randy Trask can say, and Jerry Pacheco, you had him on earlier, I remember when I was Secretary of Economic Development, we were talking about trying to create a border crossing. The state of New Mexico did not have a border crossing. And I was amazed by the resistance to create that. And now we have a border crossing. There's an intermodal facility down there, but it took some visionary leadership to push that and make it happen. But it was a unified effort. And so right now, I'm just saying, what is our vision for New Mexico post-COVID? I don't know how many conferences or meetings. I know Terry Brunner's been on, I've been on, we all been on, where we develop a plan of action and nothing happens to it. Federal contracts are coming down the pipe into Kirtland and Sandia for products that Department of Defense is contracting for. And then once that product is developed, it sits on the shelf. Why isn't it just rolled over into the private sector that we all can benefit from? You know, we talk about a brain drain from our students. My kids, grandkids all went to UNM, and then they want to move out of the state because they don't want to open a restaurant. And you know, there's got to be more for them here. So I think there's got to be a sense of urgency. We need to create a sense of urgency right now because of COVID. It's given us that opportunity, and it's given us a reason to have these kinds of discussions. We wouldn't be having these kinds of discussions if there was no COVID. We'd be going about our same way, attending conferences and everything else. But I think this kind of discussion has to take place at a greater, higher level with an action plan that we're all on a unified plan, and not just at the county, state, city, but at the federal level. It's got to happen. And I think it's happening. It's starting to happen because I know there's discussions like this that are going on. So I think I'm very optimistic about what is going on right now. And I feel that it's going to take just some strong leadership that will identify and help us push that vision. And if they don't, then we've got to push it ourselves. I think we all have to get on the same action plan. So that's my take.
Thank you. Patrick, Terry, or Angelica?
Yeah, Manuel, I would, to answer your question, I think that one of the federal issues that we could talk about that New Mexico could leverage is the ongoing relationship with China. I know that again feels very far away from New Mexico and very far away from our families and communities, but I think that looking at it, it's something that is going to be an issue for the federal government for the foreseeable future in a lot of ways that we could really help the federal government and take advantage of. Also, you know, working with the private sector. So, you know, to begin with, New Mexico's largest trading partners are China and Mexico. And we import from China and we export to Mexico. So what is happening, again, because of New Mexico's position between Los Angeles and Houston, is that we got a lot of Chinese imports into the US that then flow over the border into Mexico to become involved in the North American automotive and consumer good manufacturing platform. So what that means is that New Mexico is right in the middle of that. So if our imports from China and tariffs increase against China, or if our trade relation deteriorates with respect to China, that's going to hurt flows coming in and through New Mexico, which again is going to hurt, it's going to depress demand for greater infrastructure. It's going to depress demand for restaurants, small businesses, value-added services all around that area. Even today, 53% of the exports from the El Paso Customs District, which includes Santa Teresa, are of 53% of the exports by value are foreign origin. They're basically Chinese. So 90% of the exports going across the border into San Jeronimo from Santa Teresa are Chinese components that are getting manufactured at the Foxconn facility. So that's not a tremendously diverse supply chain that exists there, but it again is an opportunity to start thinking about building advanced technology manufacturing back in the United States. And we might not be able to do that here in New Mexico, but it's something that we could participate in nationally. This administration, the past administration, were both very concerned about China. We're very concerned also about manufacturing loss and decreases in the United States. So this is something where New Mexico, again, with these PhDs that have been mentioned by John and others, our entrepreneurial spirit, could think about how to supplement technological imports from China and reshore them, or at least help other communities around the US strengthen that kind of industry. But then there's also other issues related to China, you know, the import of fentanyl and other kinds of illicit substances that New Mexico and its law enforcement could also, you know, deal with and provide value-added opportunities for our lawyers, for our law enforcement officials, and our expertise in that as well.
Yeah, great. That's very insightful. Appreciate it. Yeah, Terry or Angelica?
I just add is just more of a comment is that I think the support on the Fed Gov side has really fostered collaboration and like Casey mentioned, served kind of as a broker to private and federal. And I want to speak to how I've seen that here locally, just in our government. The relationships that have really come together during this pandemic and have really worked together in ways that I've never seen before. I'll use HSD as an example. They use those federal dollars and had to decide how to distribute those to our state hospitals. And so our hospital association had to, come to the table and have communications and really advocate for our hospitals across the state and say, so-and-so facility needs this much in support. And then, HSD says, well, but we gave them 2 million. And then we have to say, well, 2 million covers 2 weeks of payroll. And so it's, normally these conversations would be very tense and just very strained, but just seeing two parties come together like that, because it was for the benefit of the New Mexican. It's for the benefit of our overall community. So I think that's been kind of an interesting aside that's popped up and that we've been able to see in our local government community.
Thank you, Angelica. Terry.
As far as what the feds will be discussing that I think impacts us these days, I mean, a lot of good suggestions, I think, about the free flow of money and things like that. But the one that I've been watching a lot is just the changes in workforce, issues like paid sick leave, increase in the minimum wage, the idea that people won't be working in offices like they used to. I think those are dramatic changes in the labor situation in our world, really, in our nation. And I think of my young children and what their work is going to be like compared to my work experience, and it's going to be totally different. We had a debate yesterday. I'm the chair of the Albuquerque Development Commission, and we were debating something downtown, and it was a good, I thought, positive project to increase some assets downtown. And what was the response? What are you going to do about downtown parking? And we had a 4-hour debate about how many parking spots there are downtown in Albuquerque. And it was very much a 1990s debate about parking spaces. And I kind of said, in 10 years, is anybody going to be parking anymore downtown like they do now? It's going to be totally different. Why are we still talking about these things that we talked about last century? So the nature of work is just going to have such an impact on everything we do. And I think that's the one to watch. I mean, you have the paid sick leave that passed the state yesterday or was signed by the governor. You have minimum wage increases all over the place. I mean, it's going to be really different when in our state, if people are not living in subsistence type of environments because their pay has gone up. I mean, what does that do? That's going to mean incredible things in our state's development. So that's the one I'm watching.
Fantastic. We're at 2:14, and I want to make sure that I'm respectful of time for the next forum session. What I do want to say first and foremost is thank you, not just for being on the panel, but I know that each and every one of you have done a great deal of work to try to understand, measure, and articulate what it is about New Mexico that we can always improve. And I have the highest respect for what you guys do, and I'm really grateful for all the work that you've done. To this end, I also we have our poll, and it's just a general poll that asks about how we think about the outlook based on our discussions. So how strongly do you feel that the national federal support system is building resilience for the New Mexico economy post-COVID? That's open now to you all, and I invite you all to answer. While you guys are answering, I'll just kind of note as a preview, we'll have a 15-minute break, and then we're going to move into another corresponding session with a presentation on the border complex. So Okay, so again, these discussions actually have been very hope-inducing. I've seen consistently throughout that. So here, 73 people agree that that we're building resilience for the New Mexico economy. So, in and of itself, that's very interesting to see how our reactions are to this, because a lot of this stuff can be very doomy and gloomy, but in a lot of ways, we've come out of each and every one of these discussions with some really positive feedback. So, thank you for that. Anyway, thanks to all of our panelists, Terry, John, Patrick, Angelica, Casey. Many, many thanks. And we'll be in touch soon.